And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to try and facilitate some discussion on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Warm welcome to Kushbu, Mataji, Partha Prabhu. Thank you so much for your kind association. So we're reading today from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto, chapter 8, verse 19, chapters entitled Prayers of Queen Kunti. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudireye Nastapraye Vyabresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Nishtaki. Maya Javinika Chanam Agnya Dokshayam Avyayam Nalakshasya Mudadrishta Nayo Nato Natya Daro Yatha. Word by word. Maya, deluding.
Deluding.
Javanika, curtain. Archanam, covered by. Agnya, ignorant. Adokshajam, beyond the range of material conception, transcendental. Avyayam, irreproachable. Na, not. Lakshyase, observed. Muddadrisha, by the foolish observer. Nataha, artist. Natya Daraha, dressed as a player. Yatha, as. Translation: being beyond the range of limited sense perception, you are eternally the irreproachable factor covered by the curtain of deluding energy. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Mataji, would you like to start off reading the purport?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna affirms that less intelligent persons mistake him to be an ordinary man like us, and thus they deride him. The same is confirmed herein by Queen Kunti. The less intelligent persons are those who rebel against the authority of the Lord. Some persons are known as asura. Such persons are known as asuras. The asuras cannot recognize the Lord's authority. When the Lord himself appears amongst us as Rama, Narsimha, Varha, or in his original form as Krishna, he performs many wonderful acts which are humanly impossible. As we shall find in the 10th canto of this great literature, Lord Sri Krishna exhibits his humanly impossible activities even for the days of his lying on the lap of his mother. He killed the Putna witch, although she smeared her breast with poison just to kill the Lord. The Lord sucked her breast like a natural baby, and he sucked out of her very life also. Similarly, he lifted the Govardhan hill, just as a boy picks up a frog's umbrella, and stood several days continuously just to give protection to the residents of Vrindavan. These are some superhuman activities of the Lord described in the authoritative Vedic literatures like the Puranas, Itihasas, histories, and Upanishads. He had delivered wonderful instructions in the shape of Bhagavad Gita. He has also shown marvelous capacities as a hero, as a householder, as a teacher, and as a renouncer. Is accepted as a supreme personality of Godhead by such authoritative personalities as Vyasa, Devala, Ashita, Narada, Madhava, Shankara, Ramanuja, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanatha Chakravarti, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and all other authorities of the line. He himself has declared as much in many places of the authentic literatures. And yet, there is a class of men with demoniac mentalities who are always reluctant to accept the Lord as the supreme absolute truth. This is partially due to their poor fund of knowledge and partially due to their stubborn obstinacy, which results from the various misdeeds in the past and present. Such persons could not recognize Lord Sri Krishna even when he was present before them. Although difficulty is that those who depend more on their imperfect senses cannot realize him as a supreme Lord. Such persons are like modern scientists. They want to know everything by their experimental knowledge. But it is not possible to know the Supreme Person by imperfect experimental knowledge. He is described herein as adokshaja, or beyond the range of experimental knowledge. All our senses are imperfect. We claim to observe everything and anything, but we must admit that we can observe things under certain material conditions only, which are also beyond our control. The Lord is beyond the observations of sense perception. Queen Kunti accepts this deficiency of the conditioned soul, especially of the woman class who are less intelligent. For less intelligent men, there must be such things as temples, mosques, or churches, so that they may begin to recognize the authority of the Lord and hear about him from authorities in such holy places. For less intelligent men, this beginning of the spiritual life is essential, and only foolish men decry the establishment of such places of worship, which are required to raise the standard of spiritual attributes for the mass of people. For less intelligent persons, bowing down before the authority of the Lord, as generally done in temple, mosques, or churches, is as beneficial as it is for advanced devotees to meditate upon him by active service. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai. Om Jnanatirimandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshiram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Siyam Rupa Karamayam Tadati Swapanatikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajataham Sagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padahan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakansvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Satadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhishya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion on this wonderful verse and wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada. So much to extract here. So I'd like to seek your blessings that I can say something of use and facilitate some discussion that might be useful. And I was reading this verse in purport. You please have to accept my apologies. I haven't had, I was in the office today, didn't have so much time to prepare. So I'm going to need your help, hopefully. But together, hopefully, we can come to some understanding together of what this verse is trying to say to us here, what Queen Kunti is saying here, and what the meaning is behind, extract the meanings behind Srila Prabhupada's purport. But I wrote the topic, so why can't we see God? And this was like a running theme I felt throughout the purport. And within that, I was thinking, okay, so what are people's general blocks? What are their blocks to seeing God? Then going deeper, we're in Krishna consciousness, but we still can't see Krishna. Why? What are our blocks? Even if we're in Krishna consciousness, what are our blocks to seeing Krishna, to seeing God? And then just a few thoughts on removing these blocks. So how can we have these blocks to seeing Krishna? Something is getting in the way of us and God, us and the Supreme Lord. So how can we move these out the way? What are these, and how can we remove them? So I want to go through in that kind of format. But before we begin, I had a question for all of you, which is often religionists of any faith, what to speak of within Krishna consciousness, we get asked the question, okay, God is real. Show me God. Where's God? Show me. So I'd love to hear from anyone. What would be your answer to such people? If you've ever been asked, or you've heard in classes, or people say, show me God, what would you say to them? Any thoughts?
Well, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
What I would say is that, we are experiencing God all the time, all around us, because like when a tree grows from a small seed into such a specific, it's so specific with its character, and the clouds, sun, oceans, rivers, a moon, and even like birth and death, and all that life that within us, our own body is such a complicated system. All that is a creation of God and is an evidence of God.
Thank you so much, Krishna, for a nice answer from my mother. So my mother is saying that, well, the trees, they didn't just come by. No, that's a wonderful example of God. How could they grow in such a perfect form? The sky, how did it get there? That's surely God as well. But just playing devil's advocate, an atheist may say, well, that's science. That was formed by the Big Bang Theory, and trees are just a part of evolution. So you're just giving the word God, but I say evolution. So that is something to think about also, that they may say things like that. We see the splendor in the world around us as Krishna, but through an atheist vision, they see that as just natural evolution. So yeah, just being a bit more challenging there. Panchali Mataji, you had something to say?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. So I don't know, please correct me, Prabhuji, but was it Prabhupada or one who said that, do we have the eagerness to see God? If we have the eagerness to see God, God will show himself to us and we'll be able to see God. But if we don't want to see God, and if we don't see God, that means we we haven't shown enough eagerness, or we are not qualified enough to see God.
Yeah, thank you very much, Panchali Mataji. So, yes, so Panchali Mataji is saying that if we don't want to see God, we won't be able to see him. The eagerness isn't there. I still think, as a putting my seat in the as an atheist, I don't think I'd be convinced by that answer. I would say, oh, I don't want to see. Why would I want to see God? He should prove himself to me, and then I can see him. So yeah, like why would I want to see someone who I don't believe exists? My life is very hard, and God, you say God's got a plan, all this kind of thing. So yeah, it's a difficult thing. Kirtika Mataji, you had
I would tell the atheist that you don't have perfect senses to see the Lord, because for example, I can give them examples of supersonic waves or ultrasounds. We can't see them, we can't hear them, but they do exist. So so for hearing, we can hear from this range to this range. Beyond that and above that, we can't. But yet, the dogs and other animals can see or hear more than us. So we do not have the perfect senses to see the Lord, and therefore we can't see him. But he exists because we can feel him, like we can feel the air, but I can't see the air. Where is the air? If the atheist asked me, I can't explain, but obviously everybody has Paramatma in them and they can feel it.
Oh.
So
thank you very much, Mataji. Thank you, all of you, for your so in one sense we can see this. If we're able to have that vision, we can see the splendor of God all around us, and the trees and the sky. But Hare Krishna, did someone else have something to say?
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yeah, so I think the way to explain to some atheist would be that we cannot see God, as Mataji said. We don't have that senses, we don't have that eyes, nothing. Only we can see God if God himself wants to reveal himself to us. We don't have any power, but only if God himself wants us to see him, then only we can see him. Otherwise we can't see with our own eyes or even with our own wish. Only his wish can be, he can show us with his own wish only.
Thank you so much, Mother Rupa Mataji. So yeah, Mother Rupa Mataji is saying only through the Lord's mercy, only when he decides to reveal himself, that he can be seen. And Avinash Prabhu has said there's no evidence from an atheist point of view, but our evidence is through Vedas and spiritual masters. We exit because the Lord exits. Everything is perfectly placed. Again, similar point to my mother Shobha said that how can everything be perfectly placed? There's a perfect designer, sun, moon, etc. So all wonderful answers. And actually, I liked what Kirtika Mataji said, because it's alluded to in the purport here. Srila Prabhupada alludes to this, that we have imperfect senses. So there's three types of the ways we can get knowledge. So first is Pratyaksha Praman, which is through our senses. And as Mataji rightly explained, there's so many things that we can't perceive just with our senses because they're limited. This is one of the four defects of a human being, as we know from study of Isha Upanishad. And just to give it a simple example, we look at the sun and it looks tiny according to our senses, but we know that it's a huge mass. But just from our senses, we would think that it looks very small, and we can't really perceive how much heat it really produces. Higher than that is Anuman, which is through Anuman Praman, which is through experimental means. And I was reading an article on this, and I saw experimenting through the senses. But again, this is limited. And I saw a very humorous picture where there were several people that were blindfolded and just using their sense of touch, feeling an elephant, and they had to guess what it was. And one person, he felt the leg and said, "Oh, this is a tree." Another person, they felt the tail and said, "Oh, this must be a rope." Another person felt its body hard and thought, "Oh, this must be a huge wall." Another person was by its ear and the ear was flapping. He said, "Oh, this must be a fan." Another person grabbed the trunk and it was moving and said, "Oh, this is a snake." Another person felt the tusk and said, "Oh, this is a spear." And again, we can see they're all wrong because they're not being told what it was and they're relying on just their limited sense perception. It's a humorous example, but ultimately, even throughout, probably a scientific example is very, very well respected in the scientific field is Stephen Hawkins, and he wrote this book, A Brief History of Time. And at the time, it was a very well received. And then later on, he actually said he proved himself wrong and said, "No, this is all wrong, actually." And again, this is because we hear so many things in today's modern world which are derived from speculation, mental speculation and sense perception, and they're given down as fact, but in reality they're just theories. So the highest is actually Shabda Praman, hearing from a higher source. So I was just thinking about a example. Obviously, we look for the highest source is God himself and his bona fide representatives. Example could be given that as a child, we're told don't play with fire. Now, we can either, find out for ourselves why we shouldn't play with fire, or we could, experiment with fire and get burnt, touch fire, get burnt, or we could listen to an authority and think, okay, my mother said, don't play with fire or you will get burnt. And then we wouldn't have to go through the reaction. So like this, Shabda Praman, we hear from an authority, bona fide authority. And like this way, this is the highest form of knowledge. Thank you so much for all your wonderful answers in terms of show me God. I've heard a few lectures around this because it's often a common question that's given. So I thought it's important as practitioners of Krishna consciousness that we're able to articulate this, because we live in a world where people, in a very atheistic world, where people are often asking us to show me God, show me God. And this can even penetrate our consciousness and create some doubt. Some examples I've heard given in class is, for one, obviously, if you were to say 100 years ago that one could fly from one side of the world to another in a big piece of metal, people would think you're crazy. But now everyone takes airplanes, right? If people told you that you could speak to someone through a little black box and you can speak to someone clearly from the other side of the world, they'd also think you're crazy. And now everyone uses a mobile telephone, even children. Swayam Bhagavan Keshav Maharaj was once giving a class in Vrindavan, and he was recalling how he was sat in a class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj, and Jayadvaita Maharaj was talking about how Hanuman leapt over the sea to Lanka, and one person was in the class, and he said he became very agitated, and in the middle of the class he stood up and said, "No way he could have done that. This is just make-believe. This is just fairy stories." And then Maharaj said to him, "Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that Hanuman can't do it." To which point then the man became kind of affected. His ego became affected, and he said, "How do you know I couldn't do it? Maybe I could do it. Yeah, maybe I could do it. How do you know I couldn't do it?" At which point Maharaj said, "Well, if you can do it, then Hanuman can do it also." So sometimes we think in the realms of our limited material abilities, And we find this hard to believe. And I've heard this, sometimes new people come, they'll hear about Bhagavatam. I know my mother once brought someone new, and it was a class about Bhagavatam, and the woman said, "Oh, this is just fairy stories. It's make-believe." We talked about how Panchali Mataji mentioned Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada often gives the example of if one wants to see the prime minister or the president or a person in power, I can't just say today I want to meet the prime minister of England and get an audience with such a powerful person. It just wouldn't happen. In the same way, if one wants to get an audience with God, one must be suitably qualified to do so. So one can't just see God just like that. This is the most powerful personality of all time. What to speak of, if it's hard to see just a prime minister or a president, leader of a country, even just to see the CEO of companies we work in is difficult. So this is the CEO of the entire multiple universes. And there's so many evidences within our scriptures just to convince people that these scriptures are bona fide. I was speaking to one person, new person, who's quite scientifically minded, and there's an amazing devotee called Radha Mohan Prabhu. If you're into this kind of thing, I'd strongly recommend his videos on YouTube. And he's very into Vedic cosmology, and he's gone into detail studying the Surya Siddhanta, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Vedic calculation of distance between planets and the radius of planets is actually is very, very similar to modern calculations. So how could they do this? So, there's several things in which align with Shastra, which also aligns with modern evidence. But my point is also, which Avinash Prabhuji kindly alluded to, is ultimately you can give all this evidence to people who say, show me God, show me God. But there's an old English saying, is the proof is in the pudding. The proof of the pudding, is in the eating. So this practice of bhakti is a science. It's not just some sentimental, thing. There's, Srila Prabhupada has written a wonderful book, The Science of Self-Realization. So how do you do this? Isn't theory. This isn't just speculation. This is a science. So how do you prove a science? Is you do an experiment and you get a desired result. So the idea is the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Ultimately, practice the principles of bhakti, and see if you get a certain result. And ultimately, once you taste the bhakti, we're all here because we have some taste, some rasa. We've experienced some taste that keeps bringing us back. We may even have some doubts. We may not believe everything that we read, but we keep coming back. Why? Because I can't claim to have seen Krishna right in front of me, but perhaps I've felt him in some degree. And so this practice the principles of bhakti, see if you get some kind of result, and then slowly our consciousness becomes purified and we may be able to perceive him to some degree. So that is what I wanted to just turn this a little bit in terms of show me God, because we often get asked that. And maybe it may create doubts even in our own mind. Wanting to talk a little bit about now we're in Krishna consciousness and we're practicing Krishna consciousness to some degree, but we still have some blocks. So it's difficult to perceive God. Later in the Bhagavatam, it's described how Krishna, upon receiving the summons with his brother Balaram to be seen by Lord Kamsa, he came across a washerman who was a washer of Kamsa's clothes. And this washerman was right in front of Krishna. And Krishna said, give me those clothes. And he refused. He refused to give Krishna the clothes. And this washerman actually, I'm sure read somewhere that actually previous lifetimes he'd prayed for an audience with God, and now God was before him and he's refusing to give him some clothes. And then obviously we have the case of Duryodhan, many times interacted with Krishna. He was there right in front of him. You know, Krishna was there right in front. He was conversing with Krishna, and he couldn't perceive him as God. And it said, actually, I read an article which said only about 200 people actually knew Krishna was the Supreme Personality of God at the time, even though he was there physically present with them. So then we think about actually earlier in this, early in the first canto, we actually, there's a beautiful verse in the 6th chapter here, and verse number 21. The Lord speaking to Narad Muni, "O Narad, I regret that during this lifetime, you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely free from all material taints can hardly see me." So at this point, Narad Muni has seen the Lord, he's perceived him, and then he can't see him again. So this is a little clue as to some of our blocks in when we're in Krishna consciousness and we can't see the Lord, is that we have some material blocks or material taintings. And only through the process of practicing Krishna consciousness, we can remove these blocks through association with the devotees and through practicing the bona fide methods. So I had another question for you all, which is, and it was asked a few weeks ago, was some people, they're exposed to Krishna consciousness for many times. They see devotees, they get some association, they might get given a book, they're given prasad, they're told about Krishna consciousness, even members of their family may be practicing Krishna consciousness. They get all this exposure, but they just don't take to the process. But yet some people, they get very little exposure and suddenly they take to it very quickly. So why is it that some people take to Krishna consciousness and why is it that some don't? And sometimes, and I think this is a very important question and something we clarify in our own minds, because so we may be in families which aren't practicing and we care about our families. We want them to take up Krishna consciousness, and it can even be upsetting for us to see them, you know, kind of wasting their lives with material pursuits. So I think it's important. So any thoughts on this? Why is it that some people, they just don't take to Krishna consciousness?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
I think it comes from our past, with our karmas, our past lives, the way we lived and where we left off with our religion. And Krishna says that in this life, you will just automatically continue where you've left off.
Thank you so much, Pramila Mataji. Yes, so previous pious credits, to the mercy of the Lord, Avinash Prabhu said the same, previous pious activities or the mercy of the Lord or his devotee. Yes, so good. Both very, very good points. Did anyone else have anything to add?
No, Prabhuji, I just want to ask, what do you mean by Krishna consciousness? When you say they don't take on Krishna consciousness, that's a very big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not talking about pure Krishna consciousness. I'm talking about this practice. So just ultimately what we're all trying to do. I don't claim to be Krishna conscious myself, but I'm trying to become Krishna conscious. So I'm trying to, and the pure Krishna consciousness, pure unalloyed bhakti we've discussed, is where one can see Krishna, a pure devotee can perceive Krishna in every moment, in everything, and they're thinking of Krishna all the time. So this is the level we're trying to get to. So what I mean by Krishna consciousness, I mean the practice of trying to get to Krishna consciousness. Does that make sense, Sunday Mataji?
Do you mean the 4 regulative principles, doing the japa 16 rounds? Is that
thank you, Mataji, for explaining. So this is a very important point actually that Sandhya Mataji has explained, is that all these things Sandhya Mataji has said chanting japa, taking prashadam, hearing about Srimad Bhagavatam, doing service in the temple, listening about Krishna, listening to lectures about Krishna. That's Krishna consciousness. But ultimately, the process of Krishna consciousness isn't just what we do in the morning or the evening or whenever you happen to do bits of sadhana, listening to lectures, chanting. Krishna consciousness is a moment-to-moment practice. Just want to say that again. It's a moment-to-moment practice. So we're discussing Bhagavatam, we're discussing Bhagavad Gita, where we chant in the mornings. Yes, we're trying to get better at our sadhana, our spiritual practice, but ultimately, all this is trying to feed into our day-to-day activities. So through reading and discussing the principles of Bhagavatam, of Bhagavad Gita, that actually even the work we do becomes a Krishna conscious activity. Externally, it may look like we're going to the office or working as a doctor or whatever activity we may be doing externally, but internally, the pure devotee, he's practicing Krishna consciousness. Arjuna was fighting on the battlefield. So externally he was fighting, but internally he's performing devotional service because he's doing what Krishna said, and he's doing it with, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, with full consciousness of me. So that's what we're aiming. It's a very lofty, high position, but ultimately that's why we're doing this sadhana, this spiritual practice, and we're constantly trying to adjust our consciousness and uplift our consciousness so that we're constantly thinking about Krishna and see everything and everyone in relation to him. So this is the practice of Krishna consciousness. Not easy, but it's so much, sadhana is a very, very important part, and it's the foundation of this, but it's not, ultimately we want to get to the point where everything that we're doing is Krishna consciousness. So I hope that makes sense, Sandhya Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, there's some very...
Can I also please, ask a question? The same question you asked, you said we can see Krishna. What did you mean by we can see Krishna? What do you mean? That if we perform our sadhana properly and everything is going right, how many people are able to see Krishna? Can anyone see Krishna?
Wow, very deep question, Mataji, and not one I don't feel qualified to answer, but I'll just speak from, it's said, the topmost devotee of Krishna is Radharani. And when Radharani is with Krishna, she sees him. But when she's without Krishna, she sees him everywhere. And what do we mean by this is that earlier we were saying to people, show me God. And we asked that question. And as the teachings of Krishna consciousness become deeply embedded within our consciousness, and we learn more about the creation of the universe and the plants and the trees, and that he's situated in everyone's heart. What I mean by seeing Krishna is we can look at the sky. A pure devotee will look at the sky and think Krishna. A pure devotee will look at a tree and think Krishna. A pure devotee will think of the relatives and think of this is a living entity with Krishna residing within their heart. And everything that they do and everything that they see will in some way, they'll be able to relate that to Krishna. So that's what I mean by seeing Krishna. They may not physically see Krishna appear all the time, but they'll be thinking of Krishna internally. So that's what I mean by see Krishna everywhere. Does that make sense, Mataji?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Krishna.
Okay, so the reason I mentioned this point of how come some people don't is because there's a very nice point mentioned by Srila Prabhupada within the purport. So Prabhupada said, yet there is a class of men with demoniac mentality who are always reluctant to accept the Lord as the supreme absolute truth. This is partially due to their poor fund of knowledge, so poor knowledge, one. But even if they get knowledge, as rightly mentioned by Avinash Prabhuji, Pramila Mataji, partially due to their stubborn obstinacy, which results from various misdeeds in the past and present. So I hope sometimes this just remembering this really helps me, because sometimes, you know, we can feel very disheartened and sad that some people, they just don't take to Krishna consciousness. But we can understand from here, from Srila Prabhupada nicely explain that it's not up to us ultimately, you know. Ultimately, it's up to the mercy of Krishna, the mercy of the pure devotee, but also due to that individual's past misdeeds and the choices that they make. So that is, you know, it's important to remember this, and then we can have a level of detachment. We can do our best. We can try and show these people by our example that in Krishna consciousness, we can feed them prasad and we can pray for them. But some people, they may never take to Krishna consciousness in this life, but just by, you know, serving them in some capacity according to where they're at, we can at least help them get an opportunity in their next life. And it's an important point to mention here also is that those who are unfavorable to Krishna consciousness, we need to use a little bit of intelligence and understand that if we talk about it, it's mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, if we talk about Krishna to people who are not believing in Krishna, after some we can actually get reaction for that also, because we're causing them to make offenses, and so as a result, that's an offense on our part as well. So in this instance, sometimes if we're preaching to people, telling people about Krishna consciousness who aren't so favorable, sometimes it's better not to, or we have to use our intelligence here and sometimes think, okay, this person, they're going to cause offenses. Maybe better I can just give them some prasad and maybe talk on a lower level, maybe not talk about Krishna directly, but some practical applications of Krishna consciousness which may help them. So that's just an important note to mention. So there's much in this purport, much that we discussed. So thank you so much all for your wonderful contributions. I just wanted to top off with, so we've talked about this principle, show me God. We often ask, show me God. We talked a little bit about different blocks, and some people in the past times, they had Krishna right in front of them and they couldn't recognize he was God. We talked about people who can't accept Krishna, and we talked about why, and Srila Prabhupada nicely explains in the purport. We've got a little bit of time left. I just wanted to briefly cover removing our own blocks to Krishna consciousness. So sometimes we've heard it, and I've seen it myself and experienced it myself. We can be practicing Krishna consciousness for some time, but we may lose enthusiasm. We may you know, we may think, oh, I'm not really getting anywhere in Krishna consciousness. I'm not feeling so much like enlivened in Krishna consciousness. And sometimes, you know, we may see actually there's some block there then to our practice of Krishna consciousness. So how can we, what are these blocks and how can we remove them? So first point I want to make on this is be an observer of the self. So just a question for self-reflection, do you ever feel envious of others? Do you ever feel angry? You know, do you ever wish that you had someone else's karma, someone else's situation instead of yours? And in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter, Krishna, a beautiful verse, verse 20, Chakta karma phala sangam nityatito derashaya karmani abhipravatopi neva kinchit karoti saha. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So Krishna often refers to this word satisfied, self-satisfied. And if we're feeling envious of someone else, then if that means we're not satisfied. Because if we were truly self-satisfied, we wouldn't want what someone else has. We wouldn't want their situation, their position. And so it's important that, you know, we may see someone who looks beautiful and think, oh gosh, I wish I looked so beautiful. Someone who's quite tall and think, oh gosh, I wish I was quite tall like them. Or even in Krishna consciousness, someone who's like a temple president, or, you know, is doing pujari service. It's like, oh gosh, you know, look how much respect they're getting. I wish I was getting so much respect. You know, I wish I was you know, I wish I had their position. So then we need to put the mirror on ourselves and think, why is it that I'm feeling, so why is it I'm not feeling self-satisfied? Why is it I'm not happy with the position I've been given? And slowly, as we examine and reflect this, rather than ignoring it and not accepting that we have this fault within us, if we don't accept that we have faults, then this is a block to Krishna consciousness, self-acceptance. So the famous, he's like a very famous psychologist. He's known as the father of modern humanistic psychotherapy, Carl Rogers. He quotes that the curious paradox is that only when we accept ourselves just as we are, then we can change. Just to repeat, the curious paradox is only when we accept ourselves just as we are, then we can change. So if we don't accept that we have faults, think that, no, I don't have anything wrong. If someone criticizes you and you refuse that, behind that, you refusing to accept that criticism is essentially what's going on in your mind. If you think of it from a subconscious level, is you're saying, I'm not willing to work on this. Whereas if we can self-accept, okay, you know, I have faults, but that's okay. Because ultimately, if we're here on this material plane in a material body, chances are most of us, it's normal, we have faults. And the sooner we accept that and think that's okay, Krishna still accepts me. You know, I was listening to a lecture by my Guru Maharaj, and he was talking about Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, he never disqualified anyone's material faults. He never disqualified anyone from Krishna consciousness because of their material faults or qualification. He never saw all these people, the beginning people of Krishna consciousness. If you read about the history of ISKCON, many of them were on drugs. You know, he never said, okay, you smoke too much marijuana. Sorry, you know, you're not good. You're never going to make it back to Godhead. He never said, oh, you take too many drugs. You're not going to make it back to Godhead. He said, no, you've had too many girlfriends. You're never going back to Godhead. No, as long as they were trying to improve, he accepted them. So it's so important. Honesty is the best policy, being honest with ourselves, where we're at, and that's okay, as long as we're trying to improve and acknowledge these faults. But to deny that we have any faults, is a block to advancing in Krishna consciousness. It's almost like being duplicitous or pretending to be not so fallen when we are. So that's one point I wanted to make. Second point I wanted to make is there's a nice story. I'm sure I've mentioned it before. There's once a drowning man, and he's a religious man. And as he's drowning, he's praying to God. He's praying, and so as he's praying and he's drowning, a lifeguard comes out to save him, and he says, no, God will save me. Then slowly, you know, a boat comes out, says, please take this rope. He says, no, God will save me. Then a helicopter comes, drops a rope down with a, you know, safety device, and says, come, please come. He says, no, God will save me. Then he drowns, and he rises to heaven, and he comes face to face with God, and he says, God, why did you not save me? And God says, I sent a lifeguard, a boat, and a helicopter. Was that not enough? So why am I saying this? Is sometimes, you know, without true reflection, we can't perceive Krishna's hand isn't, we may not see Krishna face to face, but we can perceive him through certain things that happen in our life. It's important to take a step back and reflect on these. And this will help build our faith. you know, I sometimes look back at, you know, various things that has happened in my life, and they're just too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence, if that makes sense. Once I was struggling in Krishna consciousness and, you know, doubting the process, and I just started seeing devotees everywhere. Driving around, I see one on the road, parked up, I'd see another one here. I just kept seeing devotees everywhere. On another occasion, I was listening to a kirtan, and it was glorifying the Lord. One of the Lord's name is Madan Mohan, one whose beauty even attracts that of Cupid. And as I was driving and listening to this kirtan, I saw like a van drive in front of me, and it had Mohan in big writing on the back. Just little things like this, more things that happened, you know, many things I've experienced in my Krishna consciousness, which was too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. And just where I felt that when I've been struggling, sometimes I felt a bit of reciprocation from the Lord. It's important to remember these moments, and this can help build our faith, build our strength, build our faith in the process of Krishna consciousness. I heard a nice quote by my Guru Maharaj. He said, "Don't think how fallen you are, think how great Krishna is." So sometimes we can get down on ourselves, not accept, you know, we may have many faults, we may become a bit self-aware, but then we get down on ourselves. But then we think, you know, we read Shastra and we hear so many fallen personalities who are able to make it all the way, you know, back to Godhead. And then we look at the disciples of Srila Prabhupada and in what a fallen condition they were. And then we see them now and how advanced they are, the amazing realizations they have. Many are spiritual masters now. And to think that actually, so to think that we can't make it back to Godhead from our position is actually doubting the position of Krishna. So don't think how fallen you are, think how great Krishna is and how powerful this process is. Sometimes we think, okay, maybe I'm not, and I've thought this way myself, or I won't make it back to Godhead in this lifetime. But that means I'm doubting how powerful Krishna is. I'm denying the omnipotency and the mercy of the Lord, which is ultimately what we're dependent on. So these are some more internal things which can be blocks to our advancing in Krishna consciousness. And slowly, as we observe ourselves through self-reflection and self-adjustment, and also through requesting feedback from seniors, we can remove these blocks gradually. And ultimately, we're our own biggest blocks to Krishna consciousness. Krishna is actually, it's not that we're reaching for Krishna. Krishna is reaching for us. We're almost blocking him because we're blocking ourselves by our conditioning and so many things that we do. So all we have to do is just kind of move this out of the way slowly, and then we'll be able to perceive Krishna more and more. So there's a few thoughts on this beautiful section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Amazing verse, amazing purport. I'd like to thank you so much for your kind attention. Please forgive me for any mistakes. And I'd welcome at this point any comments, any corrections, or any questions at this time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for this amazing class. Are there any questions or comments? I think we were asking questions, and yes, Sandhya Mataji, along the way, but there is another question. Yes.
Prabhuji, not from today's class. I think Dina Sharan Prabhuji was one day talking about how some very senior devotees can fall down or I want to know, what does that mean?
Very nice question, Sandhya Mataji. So sometimes we can see, just to repeat the question, some Sandhya Mataji mentioned that in another class, Dina Sharana Prabhuji was saying that even some senior devotees, very high position, they can fall down from their position. They can leave Krishna consciousness. If you read about the history of ISKCON, happy to be, I think it's important from the right source. We do learn about the history of ISKCON so we can learn ourselves. But yeah, so what happens there? How do people fall down in Krishna consciousness? And sometimes they leave and they don't come back. So we know from this that this can be a number of things, but the primary thing I can think of is committing offenses. So that means committing offenses to devotees, committing offenses to the holy name, and also not remaining in the association of devotees. So I've mentioned many times that our saving grace is the association of devotees. And we can't hope to, it's only through the mercy of devotees we can hope to attain the highest level of bhakti and attain real Krishna consciousness. And so whatever we can do to remain in the association of devotees, we should do it. And I've talked about this before, that like when I've struggled in Krishna consciousness, my saving grace has been the association of devotees. And how we can lose the association of devotees is to become critical of devotees, to be lackadaisical in our practice of Krishna consciousness. And one point I did make here is when we chant the holy names of Krishna, it can be very difficult to chant purely Shuddhanam. That's what we're trying to get to, pure chanting purely. However, what is very attainable is what's known as Nama Bas. So sincerely endeavoring to be attentive whilst chanting the holy name of the Lord, sincerely endeavoring to not think of other things, to listen attentively while we're chanting, to not kind of take it for granted and see it as something mundane. And ultimately, if we can think of Krishna while we're chanting, we can think of the meaning of the holy name while we're chanting, we think of Krishna's pastimes while we're chanting, but sincerely just try to not think of other things while we're chanting. This is also very important. So being attentive in our practice and not being critical of devotees. So like this is my limited understanding. If we can do these two things, then and try and stay in the association of devotees, then this will protect us. Does that help, Sandhi Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, we've exhausted our time. So I'll hand over to Path Prabhu. Path Prabhu, is it possible for you to end the session? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Mataji, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Such a nice and wonderful class. Really, we are describing so many aspects of this topic, about these many examples and other things also, and also answer the questions. So thank you, Prabhuji. Also, sometimes there is like a senior devotee, even if great rishis also fall down. That is not the like we see we fall down. Maybe there is something behind reason on that. So we cannot calculate or not speculate that one. We'll just speak out like Jajati Maharaj in Bhagavatam. How he fall down, then so many things. I also asking the same question. But they have to think, what is the result? At the end of the moment, so Krishna consciousness is such a powerful and such a strong way. In the end of the moment, is supposed to be recycled, is supposed to be recall. Oh, this happened, it is coming automatically. So nothing supposed to be worried. We're supposed to learn from our previous acharyas or Bhagavatam and take the, like you told, our Guru and Gauranga, by their footprint, we can overcome these challenges. But still, we are in the right path, right track. And if there is something mistake, thank you for such a nice and wonderful class. Hare Krishna. Also, thanks all the devotees who joined here, and so continuing, you are supporting here and join in this group. I'll thank all the devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna mantra for glorification of His grace. Kamal Panchal Prabhuji, please join.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vacha kalpa tarubhascha, kripa sindhu vaivacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Kamal Panchal Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Jai.
On Eldoret ki.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.